Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Nursing Uncharted. Last episode was my solo episode, and today I'm back with my guests, and I can't tell you how excited I am. So, today is a special episode, and I think it's important because we don't really, as travel nurses, understand all of the back work that our recruitment team does for us. So I am so happy to welcome my next guest, Miss Bianca. So just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, hi, Anne, and hello. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm Bianca Otero, and I am a director of recruitment on the travel side. So I have a team that reports to me of recruiters, and then we have our recruitment assistants that we support as well, and then our team that really sources our leads. So a little bit of everything under me, and I've been here for 8 years, and it's
Oh my
been such
gosh.
a journey. I think the ebbs and flows of through COVID, post-COVID, all of the things, it has been such a journey, and just navigating this market has been interesting, so I'm really
Yeah.
excited to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you really hit the nail on the head there saying like before COVID, after COVID and how things change and they're still changing. And
Totally.
just, something that really prompted this episode were the high need contracts and that during COVID, obviously everything was a high need at that point, but now we're really kind of getting back to normal for for what normal is now, I guess. And there are those high need contracts. And I think that it's good to kind of dive into that a little bit and talk about what that looks like from the facility to, AMN and then how that works with recruitment that finally gets the travel nurses into those assignments. So I know that we had talked previously and we talk about a high need specialty that kind of stands out year round, and that being labor and delivery. Is that correct?
Totally. I think when we think about high need, right, there's typically 5 to 6 specialties that dabble in on those top 5. You think of your ICUs, your telemetries, your ORs, med surge, but L&D has been just slightly different. It's been so different. It has been very consistent throughout the year, which for anyone that was here in the past, that was not the case. It was very much isolated to seasonality of the year where we had maternal child health season, which typically was about from anywhere March, April through October. So that was your seasonality. And now L&D is consistent. It's January all the way through December. There are no down points with it, and the demand continues to grow, which is incredibly interesting. And we'll get into a little bit more of what
Yeah.
we work through.
Yeah. It's so interesting because this I can kind of relate to labor and delivery. I've never done L&D specifically, but as a NICU nurse, I that if the needs are high in L&D, then the needs kind of trickle down into the need of what I do because, unfortunately, if there's a higher delivery if the more deliveries are happening, you're going to see babies that maybe need to enter my realm a little bit. So it gets me excited because it gives me more opportunities too. But I definitely see on the market on my side, it always says like L&D. And when I got into travel nursing, it's like 6 years. I'm coming up on my 6 year anniversary, and
Congrats.
thanks. One of the first conversations I had with my recruiter was we're getting into that baby season, and those high needs. And now, like you said, it's all the time. Like it's year round. Do you like from the recruitment side, do you have insight on why that is, or do you have any ideas?
I think we can speculate a little bit in certain ways, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to have some data, but I think there's multiple factors in it. L&D is so special. I think it's a special nurse. It's a nurse that is really attached to the patient. Um, and I do think that right now we're seeing clinicians really want to be in that perm position for L&D. But and
Okay.
then you think a little bit of the staffing shortages, right? And we experience it throughout and we continue to experience it. But I think of those clinicians that may be retiring, right? Or they are going through the burnout and post COVID, because that was a lot for everyone. So I think there's a little bit of all, and the supply piece is a little bit challenging. The demand is there. We have the demand that facilities need nurses desperately, and then it's that supply. So thinking about from that recruitment lens, we do everything possible to really try and fill those needs, whether it's reaching out via email, text, really curating messaging to support the facility's needs and really highlight those needs to the clinicians is really important. But when I'm just thinking of why there is a little bit of that uptick in demand, I'd bring it back to maybe a little bit of the shortages, and maybe there's a piece of compensation that is also
Yeah.
correlated to it. So post-COVID, you're getting a little bit of those clinicians that want that really high pay, and we have right-sized slightly. So I think compensation, I think the supply part, and I think there's a little bit of a staffing shortage. So combination of all.
Yeah, and I something that really stood out to me is when you said the relationship that nurses have with the L&D patients. It is a different relationship than a lot of the other patient populations. You're basically the best friend during one of the scariest but exciting times of someone's life. And that does maybe push someone to not want to do that transiently and maybe keep them stuck in that position. So I think that was a really interesting way to look at that because I didn't really think of it that way, and it does form a different relationship than some other specialties. So
Yeah, and I think you're so close to it, right?
yeah.
So you're in that NICU position, but I think of the L&D like it's the patient, it's the baby that's coming through, and then the family.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of everything when you're in that position. So to your point, the transiency of a
Yeah.
travel position may not be something that someone is interested in really being able to be there as a perm staff and at a facility, maybe something that is more comfortable to them. So
Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah. So when you get these, and it's not always L&D, but I know that that's like been a big focus over the past couple of years. But like what does that look like from the company side? Like when the facilities are like, we need this. Like where do you guys start? What does that look like?
I think it's at that point, we think all hands on deck.
Okay.
How are we going to fill the needs, right? Because when we think of a need, it's not only necessarily like an order. And I think that can sometimes be the perception
Yeah.
that it's the demand, it's the order, but like, no, there's patients and units sometimes that are either opening or closing to support patient care. So I think we have to assess one, what does that demand look like? What is happening at the facility? What are the circumstances that they're going through? Are they building a new tower to support more? Is it because they're closing a unit because they don't have enough staff to support? So just really depending on the urgency behind the need, which ultimately is always going to stem from that patient care. So we take a look at that. And then it really is all hands on deck. We pull in almost every single person. We pull in our recruitment specialist team that really source leads to come into the company. So they're bringing in the applications to the company. They get a list consistently of what is that high need. If it's a specific facility, and maybe they are being really strategic with their power hours and really focusing on that specific specialty for X amount of time. And then down the funnel, we think of really how are we setting the pay competitively in this
Mhm.
market to
Yeah.
attract supply. And I think that is maybe the most challenging piece. Like, what is that amount?
Yeah.
And in every location, it's different. Every facility is different, whether a facility is a teaching hospital, whether it's a more challenging facility to work
Yeah.
with due to the nurse to patient ratios. So really making sure that that compensation is set and then looking at the recruiters. right? So they're the front line after all of these other pieces where they're
Yeah.
calling all of the clinicians, and we need to make sure they know what they're talking about. So educating them on what's exactly happening at that facility, at the unit, why we're asking them to drop everything and focus on certain things. We'll do a stand up huddle, right? If something is really urgent, we'll do a stand up huddle with all of recruitment, making sure they have every single detail so that they can support the needs and that they can really make sure that we are attracting supply that matches the
Right.
need of the client. And I think that's
Yeah.
the big piece, right? Like we can provide clinician after clinician after clinician, but really making sure that they are the perfect fit for both the clinician and the nurse. We want them to have a really good experience or at least know what they're walking into
Yeah.
when they get there. And then for the client as well, do they have the skill set to hit the ground running while they're there? So then at that point, the recruiters are well on their way, making the dials, emails, texts that I know all the nurses love. Um,
Yes. We love them.
we love them. And so they're making all of their calls really with the intent to fill the need. I think that's in a nutshell, really what happens on our end. Obviously, there's a lot of other complexities that I simplified right now,
Okay, you
but
didn't simplify anything. Like, I'm sitting here like, "Oh my gosh." Like, we had this conversation, a couple weeks ago, and I was like,
yeah,
"Yeah, like, I totally get it." You hit on so many things that I'm just like, "Wait, what?" Like,
yeah,
and being from I mean, I shared my experience with you because I was on an assignment at the time, and it was, full disclosure, not the best of the best assignments that I've been on, and, the big thing was, like, compensation for where I was. I didn't work in a safe place. It was hard to find housing in a safe place, and the hospital opened a brand new hospital. So, it was, like, all of those factors play into the compensation. And compensation isn't everything. I don't really want to focus on that because that is like my pet peeve as a travel nurse. And, since being here over the years, I've seen it change. And that is like my biggest, like, that'll get me going. But, it does influence, like, you can't fill a need in a place like I worked because I couldn't safely live without being compensated for that, you know, for that contract. And that does play a toll in it. So, if you're going to, you know, a bougie hospital, living in, a nice place, you think, "Oh, I want this money for this pay." But it's almost like I don't want to say hazard pay, but it kind of is in a way, like, you have to make sure that when you're going you're traveling away by yourself most of the time, like, there are friends that travel together, partners that travel together, but a lot of this you're doing on your own, and you need to make sure that you feel safe and that you can afford to work that contract. So, it was nice to hear that all of that is taking into consideration when those packages are being presented. And the facilities have to understand that too. I mean, the facility that I worked at, their nurses got paid more than any other hospital in the area because of where they worked. So they understand that as well. But
yeah.
you simplified it in a way that yes, we can now understand it, but I learned a lot from even just what you said, and we have spoken before. So I love that we're explaining that a little bit more so nurses understand why. And yeah, and,
And I
like
think
you
it differs
yeah,
from location to location to what you're saying, right? You've been doing this for 6 years, so better you know it better than I do. When it's gonna vary from location to location, from facility to facility, from start date to start date. If I call
yeah,
you and I'm like, "Anne, I need you to be here in a week," your compensation is gonna be a rapid response.
yeah,
And if I'm asking you to be here in 2 months, your rate might be a little bit different because we have more time to plan.
right.
So that's where you're getting a little bit of the variation in that compensation, even from contract to contract, location to
Yeah,
location. So it is interesting all of the things that we have to take a look at. And then sometimes when we aren't able to fill that need, right, then we have to take all of the things back to the client and like,
Yeah.
let's revisit what is happening. Or do we leverage our marketing team? Or what other levers are we pulling at that point to make sure that we do fill it? Because it is critical, right? Like,
Right.
it's not only about that compensation, it's critical that we have clinicians at bedside. And
Right.
that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
So I think we get a little bit stuck in the minutia of the compensation and all these other things, but
Yeah.
ultimately I have to always bring it back to patient care and even myself. Sometimes I get busy. You don't think
Yeah.
about it for a second, and then you think about it for a lot more, just how important it is.
And it, as a travel nurse, just to kind of go back, I remember one of my very first contracts, I took care of a baby. And in the NICU, if people listening know what the NICU is, some of these babies are in the NICU. We celebrate 100-day birthdays. Like they're in there for a long time. But they always leave us. Like the patients always leave. They're discharged. I've never left a patient before. And that's a different feeling of like, you know, and I still to this day drink my water out of the cup that was gifted to me by a family, and they begged me to stay. They're like, "Please don't leave me." And that was one of the hardest things that I ever had to do, and that's when travel nursing was really kind of put into perspective is you're there transiently. And, you know, it has influenced me extending contracts because of seeing that they need the help. They need the people there, and it may not be the best assignment that you're on, but as nurses, I can speak for myself and I can speak for my friends that are nurses. We're empathetic people and we care, and money is great, but we also know that patients deserve fair, equal, and amazing care. And if we're someplace that we don't see that, we may make some sacrifices to make sure that that doesn't change after we leave. And yeah, and I think that that's where the money isn't everything comes from. And we say that and it's such like a okay, money's not everything, but like what does that really mean? And it just made me think of that story of leaving a family that you've bonded with, that you've cultivated a relationship. I mean, like have connection with this family. And like I said, I still use the water bottle that she had made for me. It was custom, like my name's on it. And, it's just those special things really push me to be the nurse that I am. And it pushes me to be better. And it does influence where you might work. And I think that that's okay. I don't think we should sacrifice everything just because we feel bad or whatever. But I do think that it does play a part in the decisions we make as travelers. And we need to remember it's not always about the dollar signs. Like dollars are good. And I sometimes say to myself, like, money talks, but it's not everything.
It
And
isn't
I,
everything. I feel like
yeah.
your story gave me a little bit of, like, the chills because it's so I don't know, it's so sweet, and I think
Oh,
it are those are the things that, like, make it come full circle, and I think we hear those stories, and whenever our clinicians tell us these stories and we see just the Daisy Awards that they get
yeah.
based on their impact, that it truly just puts things into perspective sometimes, where in an industry where compensation is very highly spoken about, and post-COVID really changed that for us. Pre-COVID, it wasn't so much, right?
Right.
I think when I think of pre-COVID, I think of the experience, you're
Yeah.
building your resume, you're traveling for fun. When I was a recruiter, I had 7 clinicians come out from Tennessee out to San Diego, and it
Yeah.
was 7 of them, which is kind of crazy, and they were a travel all together. Usually, you
Oh,
have,
they
like, a
knew each
travel
other.
pair. Yeah. They all came from Tennessee out to San Diego. They did it for the experience. Like,
Mhm.
half of them went to other locations. I know one of them, her and I became friends through the time, but she's still located in San Diego, and it was really driven by experience, traveling with your friends, building that resume.
Yeah.
So, like, really seeing if you're gonna have Johns Hopkins on your resume or Stanford or
Yeah.
NYP, a really reputable hospital system, MGB. I think of so many, there's so many
Yeah.
great ones out there. And that was really the driving force, right? To adventure, to have a good
Yeah.
time,
Freedom, like
freedom. You don't have to,
yeah,
you can change every 13 weeks or you can extend to the freedom
yeah,
piece, right? Like you're not stuck there. But through COVID, that shifted a little bit. And now we're
yeah.
trying to bring it back
Mhm.
where it is more so driven by those experiences, which bring, I think, all of us so much more joy than always compensation conversations. But it's still, we can't ignore that it's a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah. Yeah, and, it just with I mean, we both live in San Diego. It's expensive, so we have to make sure the jobs we take, especially, like, for traveling, I have to, like, double expenses, right? So I have to make
Yes.
sure I can pay my rent here and also afford to live where I'm going to be. So it does definitely drive some component of it, and I don't wanna ignore that, but I just I wanna get back to, like, the videos that I made for, like, how I even ended up here in the first place is I would do small little social media things for AMN because my recruiter mentioned me, and I remember making this video of, like, "Just take a risk. It's worth it," you know? And it was before COVID, so it's like,
Love it.
oh my gosh, just to, like, think, like, why I did it, and I think of my pay package in San Diego, but I came from Pennsylvania, so I was making in 2 weeks in Pennsylvania what I made in 1 week, and we need to, like, remember that because it's still traveling still is more than what you're making most of the time, so, as much as we want those COVID rates, we need to get back to reality. COVID's gone. People have made comments like, "We need another COVID. I need that money again."
It's just
You know?
not sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't sustain that.
No.
Trust me, I think anybody that was in this industry, recruiter,
Yeah.
client, or nurse, I mean, COVID was fruitful in many ways. In many ways, regarding compensation, but also presented insane challenges.
Yeah. Oh, of
So
course. We don't want that back.
we
I
don't
don't
want
want
that. We can keep that in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad that we had that conversation. It's something that we definitely dove into the first time talking, and
Yeah.
it's hard because I don't wanna come off, like, preachy to be like, "Money isn't everything," but I think that, that story that just came to mind, I think if we really, as travel nurses, all have a story that we can relate to in that aspect. We may have a patient that on our very last day gets admitted, and then we leave them, and that's a weird feeling because that's not the norm. It's the other way around, and that's a shift with traveling compared to being a staff nurse. But let's get back to fulfilling those needs, and the biggest complaint that I hear or is, why do I keep getting these phone calls? And it comes down to the needs that need to be fulfilled, but why? Not because AMN needs to check a box. It's because there are patients in hospital systems that are not getting the care that they deserve. So,
Absolutely.
what I mean, I guess I kinda said it, but, like, from your aspect, why do those phone calls happen? Or, like, what is the purpose of that? And what
I
does
mean,
that
I
look like?
think, yeah, I always tell my team, like, it's not a call just to make a call, right? Like, that is not a useful way to conduct your day. Like, that's a waste of time. It really is to be intentional. It's to be
Mhm,
intentional to the locations that need the support the most. And then obviously, I mean, we have thousands of orders. So we have to prioritize certain things, but at the same time, it all is going to come back to that patient care. So there's an example that recently happened. There's an EMR project, which is an electronic medical record project, and nurses typically love that. When they happen, what it is they have all their perm staff get to learn a new system, and they bring in nurses with already that charting system experience. And so something came up in Florida, and that just opened up. So really making sure that with those like transitions of this system or of this project going up, right? It's critical that we fill the needs so that their nurses can go learn the charting system, how they need to move forward. And
mhm,
so maybe that's the call that's coming out, or maybe there's a potential strike, or maybe it's getting ready for a strike, or there are so many reasons why. So I think the message that I do want to get across is that we're not making calls and dials and emails and text and all of the things that you guys receive just for fun. As much as I would love to say it's just for fun, it's not. It is with
Mhm.
the intentionality of getting clinicians booked in the locations that make most sense for both. I want the clinician to have a great experience. I want the client to get their needs filled, and then in a timely manner. So sometimes there's urgency behind different things, right? If someone says a clinician canceled their contract, we need a backfill, might be a little bit more urgency behind
Yeah.
that than something that's further out. So it really, there's multiple factors that really lie into the reason why we're giving you guys all of a call and email and text. And I think what we do know is travel nursing is a competitive market, right? So we're also trying to make sure that we stand out amongst the rest of our fellow competitors. And not in a negative way, right? But we want to make sure that AMN is capable of supplying our clients with clinicians. And so that's really where it does stem from at the end of the day. It's that patient care. And I think we keep going back to that, but that's truly
It
why
is.
those calls are being made.
It is, and something we talked about, but actually this was just said to me because I started a new assignment, like, right after the one that I was
We
on
were
when I
talking
talked to
about?
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, it's it's not I maybe I shouldn't say this, but it's not with AMN, and there's just so many differences, and I would just, like, talk about the differences, and I know that AMN has not supplied this hospital in the past either, but what was
Yeah.
said by my preceptor was so shocking to me, is that there were nurses, they've been burned so many times because nurses were placed in the NICU with like fabricated experience.
Oh, no.
And so the
Yeah.
references,
Yeah.
there was this girl gave me this example. I didn't even ask for it. She just
Oh
presented
my
this to me
god.
because they're very because I'm like, I've been a nurse for so long. Why am I getting this intense of an orientation? And it's
Yeah.
because this facility has been burned. And the the nurse had never worked in the unit, in the specialty, and her reference was a manager that she worked under as a student, and they never called to do the background to find out until the facility asked specifically for the references, then they called the references, and the reference was like, "No, I never worked with her, she was a student." So, like,
Oh my gosh.
and I just think about, the quality of travel nurses through with AMN, there is that emphasis that you're placing a nurse with appropriate experience, with the appropriate background check, not background check, criminal background check, but, like, experience,
Yep.
so that those situations don't happen. I mean, other than this and one other contract, I've been exclusive with AMN, and I have never heard something like that. You hear stories like,
Here and there.
yeah, that travel nurses talk about. I'm like, "Yeah, right." And then to have someone tell me that that happened, I'm like, "That's insane." Like, how can you, and then you think, like, as a nurse, why would you do that? Why would you take a contract when you didn't know,
Mm-mm.
like, what you were doing?
And
And she said
I think there's, like, probably a little bit of, like, desperation in certain
yeah.
areas, right? But I do think to, like, what you're saying right now, and I will say there are times that we are more conservative in
Mhm.
what we place at a facility, and we don't throw spaghetti at a wall and see what's gonna stick. We really do pride ourselves, and our clinical team is top notch. They really make sure that a recruiter is gonna only know so much, right?
Right.
We don't have that clinical background. So we
Yeah.
are gonna look at your skills checklist, we're gonna look at your VI interview, we're gonna
Mhm.
look at certain things, but, like, our clinical team, they are all clinicians that have worked bedside, that have so much experience, and they are really, like, who we lean to so that situations like what you just
Yeah.
stated never happen under our
Right.
watch. Because that's liability. Like, imagine you at
Right.
the patient and you don't
Yeah.
know who's helping you. So that's such a liability piece where AMN sometimes we may get frustrated here and there. We're like, we want them to go there, and this clinician is perfect, and this clinician wants to go there, and they're like, well, let's take a step back and let's
Yeah.
really look at the clinical experience. Let's look at what they stated they have experience with. Let's look at the unit and the unit description that that facility is giving us and trusting us with so that we are making it that perfect match for all involved. So I will say our quality is very, very, very solid. We pride ourselves in that. And I think quality sometimes is good. I know the
It's always
quantity
good.
piece is important. I know quantity is important. And I
Yeah.
know we want to be able to fill every order. That's always our intention as long as all the supply is there, right? But quality is always gonna be top of mind through and through.
Yeah, and I think that for me, this stood out because NICU contracts are not they're very competitive from what I feel.
Very,
I mean, I
very
have
competitive.
I pride myself in my resume. I have great experience and I have even not gotten jobs and it's like it's cutthroat. It really is. So to hear a story like that when I know that it's not about quantity, that there should have been a focus on making sure that you're putting someone in there. And that being said, going back to when I started this, it took I didn't get the first travel job that I applied for because they didn't want first-time travelers. You needed at that time, you needed a minimum of 2 years experience in that specialty. Now, I'm working, like, at my not even a travel job. I ran into a nurse that had been a nurse for a year, and that was her very first travel assignment. And I'm like, "What?" Like, I had 8 years experience trying to get a travel job and I couldn't get one because they didn't want a first-time traveler. So that's shifted a lot, and that's from COVID because
Yep,
and it's like we like where did that happen? So and I'm not saying that if you have 1 year experience, you're not a good nurse. I think,
of course.
you're like people can be phenomenal right off the bat, but experience and growth to put yourself in a position of having to like basically fly off of 2 days of
Of
orientation,
orientation.
you kinda have to take a step back and it's like, yeah, you really wanna travel, but, like, we need to keep the idea of what is best for the patients, and these are life and death situations, and, like, is your skill set appropriate for those situations? And that's when I think that money prioritizes over what is best from, like, from, like, a nurse's standpoint.
Yeah,
But, that's just something that has changed as well, and I think that I mean, I'm not saying this because I do this podcast. I do trust AMN and I trust that they're doing the background checks that they need to do and I feel safe when I'm on assignment. And when I'm on an assignment that is an exclusive AMN contract and I know that all those other nurses are AMN nurses, I see the quality of nursing care that is provided.
it's so
And
interesting to hear it from a nursing perspective,
yeah.
right? So, like,
Yeah.
because you've been on contracts through AMN and contracts not, and I think that's typical, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think, AMN wants to be able to and of course, we wanna fill in all of your needs, but to your point, right, there are exclusives that another competitor is gonna have that we don't
Yeah.
have and vice versa. It's very normal, and I think we need to normalize
I
that.
always feel guilty, but
I
yeah, it
know.
is.
No, it's okay, it's okay. I know, I think there might be a little bit of push and pull on that
Yeah.
topic from both
Yeah.
ends, but I think we have to be okay with that. So it is interesting to hear from your perspective that when you get on the unit, what your experience is with those that surround you, because those are your counterparts. That's who you're gonna
Yeah.
work with on a daily basis. So it's a good reminder for us, right? And I can
Yeah.
take that back to my teams where it's like when we do place them, this is the experience that they are receiving so that when we do get pushback in those scenarios where we really want that clinician to go there and clinical is like, no, it's not
No.
going to happen
Yeah.
based on the skill set, we have to trust. and we have
Yeah,
to trust that it is for the betterment of everyone involved. And we do trust our like I said, our clinical team is top notch. They're a great partner, and they really definitely help us navigate through where can we place someone and where can't we. So
right.
the quality piece is critical.
Yeah, and just from, like, a nurse like, for the nurses listening out there, this is right at the, like, top of my mind is this last assignment, the one that Bianca, you
Oh,
and I
yeah.
had talked about. We were as travelers, we were put into a really difficult situation, like, really difficult in every aspect of that word, and those nurses, I will tell you, I trusted them with everything. I mean, they were some of the best nurses I have ever worked with, and we literally have a text group with 10 of us that, like, and we were together 2 weeks, like,
Yeah.
and really only working together for 6 days, and that's how much we had to rely on each other, and the skill set of these nurses blew my mind, and I knew that if I didn't I'm confident in what I do, and I know what I know, but, like, if I didn't know something, I would be like, "Hey, what about this?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, what if you do it this way?" And I was just like, as a traveler, we rely on each other. We're kind of like the safe place because we're not always welcomed by the staff.
The stuff.
So, we
Mhm.
can't go even if it's like a hospital policy, obviously, we can do our best, but sometimes we have to go ask the charge nurse, whatever. But, like, for clinical things, we kinda have to we have to trust who we go to, and sometimes that's other travelers, and if you can't trust the other travelers that you're with, that's a terrifying situation to be in, and I am so grateful for the experience I had, even though it was not the best. I learned a lot and I met some really amazing nurses that I would literally sign to be a reference for them any day. And they were all AMN travelers. So
It's so
that
cool.
yeah, that just really puts into perspective
Yeah,
the effort. And that was like a rapid response too. So even
it was.
the rapid need was still a quality nurses that were placed there.
I think sometimes even more so, right? Like knowing that it is gonna be a challenging situation, like, that may not be where we're gonna send that 1 year
Yeah.
traveler, that clinician that has 1 year of experience. It's likely
Yeah.
not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really interesting, and it's, cool to hear that through a challenging situation, a very challenging
Yeah.
situations, you guys were able to lean on each other and make those solid relationships in such a short period of
Mhm.
time, right? And I think even from a recruiter perspective, sometimes we forget certain things like that. And then the other piece that I just think of, like, that relationship piece with our clinicians, right? I'm just thinking of the relationship because you said, like, you have those tight-knit relationships with the clinicians. When you're on assignment, you should also have a tight-knit relationship with the recruiter that
Yeah.
you're on assignment with as
Yeah.
well. And so I just love hearing that story, and it's a good reminder to also make sure that while you're traveling, you are making those really strong relationships with your recruiters so that they know where to place you and what
Yeah.
you're looking for. And if you value that type of environment, speak up. Let us know. We can navigate things a little bit easier. But what we do know in a relationship, it takes more than one. And it takes a little bit of a combination of both. And a recruiter is just going to tell you what we have, what's going to happen. And then it's also responsibility from our clinicians to tell us kind of what they're looking for in that experience so that even if you are in a challenging place, you can't have those takeaways that
Yeah.
are positive and will teach you something for that next travel contract. Or if you decide to extend because you love
Yeah.
it so much, even though it's challenging, then
Yeah.
you can also do that. So
Yeah.
just really thinking about that piece.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because it does come down and I've said this, I say I'm very lucky that I'm on my 3rd recruiter and not because I chose that, it's just because of advancements in the company or life advancements, whatever it may be. But I've had and I've talked about this on previous episodes, I've had good relationships with all of them,
Yeah.
and it really makes a difference when you're on assignment. So I always encourage nurses that if they don't feel comfortable, if they don't really trust their recruiter, it's okay to like maybe facilitate a different relationship elsewhere because we don't always get along.
Yeah.
Our personalities are personalities, but you have to you have to trust who you're working for. And yes, you're working for AMN, but you're working with your recruiter, and that's who's going to help you succeed in this company. This is going to what's going to get you jobs in the future. So you have to make sure that you invest in each other in that relationship. And that means answering the phone. Even if it's like,
Totally.
"No, I don't want to go on that contract." Saying no is okay because that shows that that is not something that you want to do in the future, and then you won't get bugged with all these phone calls in the future.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think even to that point, it's if your recruiter is doing something that you may not necessarily agree with, also call them out. Like, none
Yeah.
of us are gonna get better with someone just being like, "Oh, I want a new recruiter." And I'm like, "Okay, well, help me understand why."
Yeah.
Right? And then they're like, "Well, I like them." I'm like, "Okay, well, then give me a why." And if it is communication or their style of communication, I'm like, "Okay, well, have you had that conversation with the recruiter? Have you had given them the opportunity to make things right?" I think the tricky part of being a recruiter is every clinician works so differently.
Yeah.
Someone wants a best friend that they want to talk to every single day while they're on assignment. And then another clinician wants to hear from you maybe once every 2 weeks, or maybe not at all, unless there is something that comes up on assignment, whether it's payroll,
Yeah.
whatever the reason is, right? Insert it. But I do think it's be fair, be honest,
Yeah.
be transparent. No one is perfect. But it does take that mutual respect between
Yeah.
the clinician and the recruiter to really have those tough conversations, right? If you don't
Yeah.
respect someone and you don't trust
Yeah.
them very much, you're not going to
Right.
be so willing to have that conversation. But I definitely always challenge both ends, our recruiters and then also our clinicians. Like, have you guys talked about this? Because it seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect. And they're like, well, no. I'm like, okay, well, let's revisit. And you
Yeah.
have my direct line. If something goes wrong, you can call me, but let's give it another try. So
Yeah.
I think
Let's be
having,
people
let's
at the end of the day.
exactly like, let's find a medium ground, but not taking away that relationship needs to be strong.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I really think we dove into a lot more than what I was expecting. I appreciate I like talking to you, to be completely honest. I feel that we get into these difficult conversations, but we each brought something to the table that we got our point across without being like don't do this, like it's
Oh, yeah.
just, just setting those reminders for everyone. I think that recruiters can get something out of listening to this conversation, and nurses will definitely get an understanding of what it's like from from AMN's side, and then from the recruiter's side, and from the director's side. Like there's so many levels of everything that as a travel nurse, you don't understand. And I maybe have a little bit more insight because I'm having these conversations with you guys a little bit more, but that's what I want people to understand. It's not secrets. We're not keeping things, no one's keeping things from each other. This needs to be a communication, this needs to be a relationship. And having those difficult conversations will help to make you feel comfortable on assignment and comfortable taking the pay package that maybe you didn't expect to take. And I
Yeah.
think that just understanding it and asking those questions is is what's gonna get this back to where it used to be.
Yeah. And I think it's getting there, right?
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly feel like
Yes.
and I feel like you and I can probably talk for forever. So I have the exact same mutual sentiments regarding chatting with you. It's always
Yeah.
so fun. Last time we were like, we had a podcast before the podcast.
Oh, we did.
Um, but we always have so much fun with it. But I do think I do wholeheartedly think that we are trying to find our new normal. And the waters were muddied a lot during COVID. And we're in a place where we're trying to identify exactly what that normal does look like, but it's getting there. I wholeheartedly and confidently feel like it's getting there. Demand is stabilizing, which is really nice to see in the market. We have a flu season this year.
Yeah.
We have a winter season this year, which in years past, we'd be like winter orders and wasn't really there. And in years past, it didn't look as normalized as it
Yeah.
is now. So I do think we are in a place where we're evolving a lot. We're learning a ton. Anyone that's in this industry is learning that we need tech to partner with us
Yeah.
throughout it. And I think that can have an episode of its own is the
Yes.
technology piece.
Good ideas.
But
I agree with that. Yeah.
right, the
Yeah.
tech.
Yeah.
So I think the industry has evolved so much and
Yeah.
we're continuously evolving with politics and political things that are happening in the world and just the world overall and
Yeah.
the cost of living and setting the rates correctly. So we really are finding our true normalization and it feels good.
Yeah.
I think it feels good as a company and I'm sure it feels good for our recruiters as well. So it's not
Yeah.
so roller coaster-ish where you're like having these peaks of demand and then
Lulls. Yeah.
cancellations and
Mhm.
back and forth, like,
Yeah.
we are seeing that stabilization, which is good as an industry for both the clinicians and the facilities and the recruiters, for
Yeah.
everyone involved.
Yeah, and I like that. I think, you are getting back to a new normal, and I think that that's a great way to say it, and, you I think your end of things sees that a little bit more than individual clinicians because we're just focusing on ourselves, but to hear that you're seeing that, I think is encouraging, and I think we should all take that, like, everyone listening should take that in and understand that, things are changing, but it's probably for the good at this point, and just like medicine, every day things change and we need to go with the flow and, continue at the end of the day keeping patient care number 1, and that's why we're all here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hit the nail on the head with that one. I think we could wrap it up with that.
I think so too. No, thank you so much for
Of
doing this. Thank you
course.
for having this
Thank you.
conversation, and I'm glad I got to meet you, and hopefully we run into each other in San Diego.
I'm sure we will. We could figure that out.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure, and I appreciate you so much.
Yes. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Nursing Uncharted. You can learn more about this episode and our show on our website at amnhealthcare.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find show updates and nursing opportunities on our Instagram at AMN Nurse. Special thanks to AMN Healthcare for making this show possible.